All right, man. Is it time for the Detroit Lions to trade David Montgomery? I remember Mike Valenti. He first started talking about them phasing out David Montgomery. It was a huge talk about going around about them phasing out David Montgomery, and what's happened under Dan Campbell. People can't blame John Morton. They can blame Dan Campbell, the head guy, who keeps saying we need to get him involved and don't get involved. That's the corporate answer, and they just paid him. And there's a lot of guys they need to move on from. I don't think David Montgomery is one of the guys they should move on from, in my opinion. I think the worst thing that happened to David Montgomery, it wasn't the injury, it was the departure of Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson, I think he hurt the most from Ben Johnson leaving. I think a lot of people would say, oh, Jared Goff was going to hurt the most, but who really hurt the most was David Montgomery. It appeared who hurt the most was, Jameson Williams with John Morton, but now he's, quickly within the top 10 of receiving yards. He has, 7 touchdowns this year under Dan Campbell. So overall, who hurts the most with him leaving? It wasn't Jared Goff. The numbers are phenomenal. Since y'all like to go on numbers, it's David Montgomery. David Montgomery has been the guy who's hurt the most because even in Chicago, it seems like they got a really good blend. They got a really good blend between the two backs from what I was seeing. I forget the other guy's name. Down in Carolina, they got a good blend between Chubb and Rico Dowdle. Whatever the reason between John Morton and Dan Campbell calling plays or supporting the other calling plays, they just don't want to get David Montgomery involved. The true telltale, if you want to know what's the true breaking point with that, is when it's 4th and short. I don't remember the games, but when they got stopped on 4th and short twice, I think it might have been Philadelphia, and they hand the ball off, and I think it's happened multiple times, to Jahmyr Gibbs, and he gets stopped. And your short yardage back is David Montgomery. Now, check this out. I think last week or a couple weeks ago, they had a 4th down, 4th and short. They put David Montgomery in there. They did a play action and picked it up. So really what that tells me is they trying to outsmart. They said, okay, we got David Montgomery in there. We got to stop the run. Let's play action. David, Jahmyr Gibbs is great at the goal line, but we talking about short situations, 1st and short, 2nd and short, 3rd and short, 4th and short. That's David Montgomery time, especially when you got 3 interior offensive linemen. That's questionable. You got you had a backup and Ashok, in Cologne, trash. Graham Glasgow is average center at best, so you don't get the push with Frank in there. You don't get that push with Frank in there. You don't have Mahogany. You don't get that push with Mahogany. Tate Ratledge is cool. You already don't have a dominant run stopper at left tackle in Taylor Decker. So when you look at it, of course, now more than ever, you should be leaning on David Montgomery. He has some really good runs this season, but guess what? He have a great run and they don't look at him again. He have a great run, out yards to carry, out the ass, touchdown, and then they give, and even with Jahmyr Gibbs, they get, 13 runs versus the Rams. You had a 7-point lead going into coming out the half, and you go away from the run. It's like that's the difference. Why Chicago is successful. Whether Chicago make the playoffs, which they will, or they don't make the playoffs, why Chicago is successful is because Ben Johnson sticks with the run. That's why people are saying Caleb Williams is great. It ain't that, Ben Johnson was able to recreate or restructure or really mold Caleb Williams into the quarterback he wants to. No, that doesn't happen in one offseason. That doesn't happen in one season. That doesn't happen. You string 2, 3, 4 seasons together for that to manifest, right? It's because they stick with the run. Run. When you throw passes and you get cheap catches or you get incompletions, that gives the other team an opportunity to get back in the game and to erase a 10-point lead, especially when your defense got a bunch of leaks on there, right? When you run the ball, it makes the game shorter. When you play field position and you kick it, it makes the game shorter. When the other team doesn't have as much time to play with as when you passing it and stopping the clock and not picking up first downs and grinding the clock out, they have more of an opportunity. They have they can't get into a rhythm like they want to, especially if you running the ball and you scoring points and you putting them behind the eight ball. It shortens the game. You see what I'm saying? So that's the problem with the Detroit Lions, to be honest with you. They don't stick with the run. David, I would agree. The only thing I didn't really like about Ben Johnson last year, I think they were better when they kind of gave the ball a little bit to Jahmyr Gibbs early and then flooded Demo. And then at the end of the game, you really, a wore out defense, you really allowed Jahmyr Gibbs to go crazy. So, at the end of the day, that's my opinion on that. But the Lions just ain't sticking to the run. Yeah, the numbers are phenomenal. They scored the most points. And guess what? Your defense give up a lot of points. When you run the ball, you shorten the game. You stop the team from getting life. You stop them from getting, touchdowns. You stop them from getting touchdowns. You stop them from scoring points. You stop them from getting into a rhythm. So they got a lot of learning to do, bro, as far as sticking with the run. With Jared Goff, you should stick with the run, especially with leads or early in the game. Even if you're going to throw to open up the run a little bit. But, Trey Montgomery, I think, is right by him, because if you continue this season and go into the offseason, it's going to be a thing. Phasing them out is going to break the team apart. Get rid of them. Get a younger guy in there. And you want Jahmyr Gibbs to be the guy, be the guy. Get somebody of lesser value behind him. You drafted Vacky. You did give up Craig Reynolds. Let him go be the guy. Let him go be the guy. But the thing that I never really understand is when something is working, why do people get away from it? And you got to ask that to Dan Campbell. The blend between Montgomery and Gibbs, the only adjustment I would make, I would get a ball to Gibbs earlier on. I let Gibbs get the first few, carries, drives. Then I let Montgomery really do his thing in the first, second, sprinkle Gibbs in there, and I let Gibbs flood him after the half. Or go with the high hand. I don't understand why they try to reinvent the wheel. Especially with 3 new interior offensive linemen or shuffling or new guys trying to get camaraderie. You need the guy with power. But like I said before, it doesn't make any sense. And I continue to say it again and again. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. When something is working, why get away from the formula? And this is just the numbers thing. Oh, if Gibbs took David Montgomery carries, he can have 500 yards again. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. If he played 16 minutes instead of, if he played 32 minutes instead of 16 minutes, that 10 and 5 that he averaged into be 20 and 10. And it's fucking 12 and 7 or 12 and 6. You're like, what happened? It's not, numbers don't work that way. But hey, thumbs up the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the link tree, check out Detroit Lions Talk playlist. Peace.